Hello, everyone. I'm going to start out a little bit before we start the question and answers on the panel of giving you a little overview from JLL Research on some of the trends in the state of the industry at this point. What we are seeing is that hotel transactions are down about 18% to $25 billion for the first half of the year, but the U.S. remains the strongest transaction market for hotels. Domestic buyers are taking center stage. If you recall, we had a big influx of Chinese investment and foreign investment for quite some time, but U.S. investors are really stepping up, many of which are on this stage. Debt is abundant, and global investment is showing interest in some secondary markets as well as premium select service. As we've seen, and Gary unveiled at the lodging conference just a couple of weeks ago, brand expansion and new brand creation is top of mind for hotel companies. So Gary unveiled the new Caption brand from Hyatt. Some owners are deferring CapEx during this time to minimize displacement during high occupancy levels. And so, we've seen that some owners renovate in the counter cycle, and some renovate just when it's time and have to do it. U.S. supply growth is at a multi-year high, but new additions of the pipeline are slowing. And company-level mergers and acquisitions continue to be active. 10 were completed in 2018, and there's another 5+ in the pipeline. One of the things that we're asked all the time are, what are some of the current impacts affecting your projects, particularly from design, construction, and development? So costs continue to rise. Consultants are spread thin, so drawing coordination is suffering in many cases. There's a strain on budgets, schedules, and durations for CapEx projects. The competition for skilled design and construction industry labor continues to be an issue. That's part of the contributing factor to costs rising and productivity levels decreasing. FF&E lead times and quality control issues are still front of mind. Construction backlog is high, so we've seen in many occasions that many GCs sometimes decline to bid because they're just too busy. And there is a growing concern with potential restrictive policy toward tariffs and immigration and how that affects the construction industry. The following 10 markets are probably the biggest markets for new development and new project management opportunities. I won't really dwell on that. And then U.S. hotel construction spending, because of the healthy U.S. economy and low interest rates, has allowed hotel construction spending to pick up in the first half of 2019. So where is the market going? You heard some things from Sonder and LifeSource and others about new things, converting excess rooms to co-living. Business models are being rethought everywhere, and innovation is front of mind for hotel brands and for owners looking to capitalize on their assets creatively. So will hotels embrace co-working? The number of hotel brands continue to grow, so what's next? And this panel today is a terrific panel of owners and brand representatives. So I hope you listen with attention, and we'll try to keep this interactive. So I'm going to start, we heard a lot today about the proliferation of new brands. Gary, I'm going to start with you. With the proliferation of new brands, the trend towards soft brands, and the heightened competition with companies like Airbnb and Sonder, what are some innovative approaches to development or renovations that you're seeing to achieve results?
I'd like to defer to Mike, please.
We are spending a lot of money on Hyatt-branded hotels. We're also spending a lot of money on Marriott-branded hotels.
Boy, that worked. I didn't think that was going to work.
I'm going to let you go first, and then I'll take the rest of it.
Yeah. No, but I do have a question for you, David. In terms of when you say achieve results, what do you define what you mean by results, because there's a lot of different ways for us to answer that.
Well, from a brand perspective, what are some of the areas, as you're looking at creating new brands or beefing up your existing brands, what are some of the things that you see that are going
Just
to
to
make
grow
Hyatt
development,
better?
in other words, to grow development of
To
our-
grow
of our
development
brands,
and
yeah.
to support the growth of your brand.
Well, I'll speak to new brands first.
Okay.
And there's a lot of reasons to add new brands. There's some are that the brand is built out in the market. There's an AOP in the market, so it gives you an opportunity to go in and layer over other brands at the same time. And other times, I think there are holes in the market still today, because what happened to a lot of us over the years are the brands kind of became the same in many ways. So you've got a name on a brand, but it's not that much different than another brand is, unless you're talking about segmentation of select service to full service. And so, when in our case where we created a new brand recently, it was because there was a hole in the brand in the area we felt that we could get into. There also was an opportunity for us to jump back into the top 200 markets that we were in with a brand in that segment already, select service, and to also define something a little bit differently. And I think that, a lot of what, when you've got older brands, it's really hard because the train has left the station. So it's really hard for you to define it after it's left. Once you deviate from what that brand is going to be, it becomes the same as the others, and it's really hard for you, except it's got a name on it. And in our case, where we're a little bit smaller, we have an opportunity, I think, to try to define them a little bit more clearly and stay a little more true. And I think that's why it's one of the best reasons why you have a lot of brands, because if you are everything to everybody, then you've got an issue. And I think that that becomes harder to have a compelling story for why they should do what you're doing. I think where you see growth or interest in whether it's independent, smaller brands or larger brands, a lot of times it is, what's the compelling reason for me to get into that? Sometimes the compelling reason is it's distribution. They've got a lot of distribution, and therefore you're going to ramp up in that particular brand, and therefore I want to go after that particular brand. And
No, so I was going to say also, from a brand perspective, it's very interesting. From an ownership perspective, Mike, you've got a lot of, formerly hard brands that you have converted to soft brands, and so from that ownership perspective, how are you seeing that changing your strategy?
So we have converted some hard branded hotels to soft brands. We converted a Four Seasons to the Logan in Philadelphia. We converted a Ritz-Carlton to the Canby in Phoenix. We recently converted a Ritz-Carlton in Buckhead to the Whitley. And we do that when we see an opportunity to maintain the same sort of top line revenue, but replace the manager with a more efficient manager and create a lot more bottom line net operating income. I think the other thing I was going to say on this particular issue is we're in the second year of a 5-year transformational capital program that we entered into in conjunction with Marriott. And this is innovative in that traditionally when we need to spend in excess of escrow reserves in order to meet the brand's new standards, typically that extra dollar is funded by the owner 100%. In this instance, while we're still funding that, we're getting an enhanced owner's priority on that incremental investment, and we're getting operating profit guarantees for the incremental disruption associated with these more significant renovations. And it's really kind of changed the economics when you need to do a really holistic renovation and you're going to spend way in excess of a traditional 5% escrow reserve. It starts to rebalance the equation such that the owner gets a reasonable return.
And obviously for Marriott, it allows one of their biggest owners to transform many of their brands that would otherwise have been tired or not have as much work done had you not worked with the partnership. Now, Krishna, you're in a unique position. You're head of design and construction for all of Wyndham, but you're president of the La Quinta brand. So you have an interesting perspective here too.
Yeah, and if you look at it, I came from La Quinta. It was a single standalone brand for years, decades. 50 years. And we have grown the brand. It was primarily a whole bunch of, I think, 250 or 300 corporate-owned hotels to just starting the franchising program. So I sat in those board meetings, and it's a fine balance that how, when you look at from the owner's perspective, when you create a new brand, the owners will think that, oh my God, you're cutting my pie, right? I mean, it's the same pie. But if you look at it from the brand perspective, that when I sat in those board meetings, you never have enough funds. The Googles of the world, the OTAs are getting bigger and bigger because they spend a lot of money in promotions and marketing and reaching out to the consumer. Somebody has asked me the other day the question that, why OTA? Why the OTAs are growing? And I said, look at the investment Google has made. If you go to a third world country somewhere in a village, and if you say to a young 10-year-old boy or a girl and say, where are you going to find this question? The answer will be Google. And I come from one of those. And so they have created that reach, and we need to consistently work as brand owners. We need to consistently work on creating that reach and the connection between us and the consumer.
So I think that's a great discussion and perspective from both owner and brand. Some of you, as we were preparing for the panel, some of you expressed concerns about things like rising development costs due to tariffs, market escalation, labor, regulatory issues, and governance. That's a lot, but how are you dealing with these issues on your projects? And what other big challenges are you seeing in the current market environment? And Mark, I'll first go to you and then add in some insight from Carl and Krishna.
Well, the good news is that the tariffs really are only affecting anything we're doing in Las Vegas, right? We have 3 locations, Macau, Singapore, and Las Vegas. So Las Vegas, we're obviously saying that as we start thinking about new projects, we have to start thinking about what the cost will be for the materials. Right? Steel, aluminum, glass, all those kinds of things that have been subject to the tariffs. It's a little easier for us in Macau or in Singapore because we don't have the same issue. However, we are seeing a lot of escalation. The projects we're doing are all very large. We're investing $2 billion in a CapEx project in Macau. We're very concerned about the costs. We have been pretty lucky right now in Macau that we've gotten some very good buys on our projects. But we are now hitting the wall with the regulatory agencies in terms of getting our permits. In certain pieces of this project, we're 6 months behind because we just cannot get the permits issued in time. We also have labor quotas that we're dealing with in both Singapore and in Macau that you have to go to the government and request labor. So we're looking for 4,500 people on our job site in Macau. We've got about 3,000. We could use more. But until we get our permits to actually do the rest of the work, I don't need another 1,500.
Right.
But it's all just planning right now. It's anticipating where the numbers are going to go, what the schedules are going to be, and how they're going to be impacted by all of these events that you can't control.
And Carl, you brought up environmental, social, governance issues as big challenges. Yeah. What about that could you share with the group that has created those issues for you?
Sure. As you look at sort of the industry, and you think back to 2005, and you see ESG sort of getting some traction in the industry, and as you think about the environmental, social, and governance impacts on publicly traded companies, you'll note that that's one of the things that we're measured by. So for us, it's really important that we're thinking about, how to create work environments where your employees are focused on innovation, they're focused on efficiency, they're focused on trying to create the best product that's possible, looking at recycling, looking at opportunities to do things smarter for the environment, for the climate. So that's one of the things that we spend a lot of time on with regards to planning projects, and I'll sort of tagline back to my colleague's comment regarding planning. And as you look at all the issues that you just mentioned, David, the majority of them really take a 12-month typical time cycle from start to finish, and now it's 18 to 24 months.
Yeah.
And it's placing more pressure on the planning professionals, the construction industry, the schedulers, the FF&E, everybody who's in the life cycle, to really bring their A game, provide information so that now, instead of looking at a 2-year sort of planning cycle or a 5-year CapEx plan, you're really looking at it from a more holistic approach. And you're also trying to look at the economic landscape as well to figure out, is this the right time? Is it not the right time? And if it is the right time, how can we take a package, a design package that's on the shelf, execute that, or come up with some other innovative approaches. But ESG, absolutely a requirement. And for us, we're spending a lot of time really thinking through, trying to be practical and pragmatic about how do we look at the climate, look at the environment, look at our work environments, and everything that sort of goes into ESG to make sure that we're being responsible owners.
I know, Krishna, you had your big Wyndham meeting, a week ago?
Yeah.
Where you brought together owners, developers, the operators, the different brands. On these, was this a topic of conversation?
Yeah, I think every industry meeting you go to, construction cost, rise of construction cost, tariffs, labor shortage, those are the topics which are coming over and over. But I believe in the necessity is the mother of invention, and this is the time when all of us as designers, I am an architect by trade, I went to the architectural school, so now it's time for us to think a little hard, and copy and pasting the plans from a previous project, this is not the time. I think this is the time when we all need to, my designers need to look at that. Why do we need 24-inch credenza versus 20-inch? Can I just save some material cost on that? It will be environmental friendly, as well it will eat some of that tariff cost. So I think this is the time, testing time I call it, when we all need to work together and just find ways to create solutions to these problems. And I think some of them are easily manageable, some of them are related to construction, a little harder, but that's when I just put my architect hat and I say, why we are as an architect creating shapes. I have done a project in New York about 10 years ago, and the architect has developed 33 room types in a 96-room hotel. 33 room types. I mean, why would you do that? Make it simple. Keep it simple. That way we can create the results at the end. So simplicity and innovation is going to just take us through this big challenge.
So with simplicity and innovation, let me just address the owner's perspective. Mike, I'll start with you. You briefly touched on it with your relationship with Marriott, and then we'll have Carl and Mark weigh in as truly the representative owners. So when you think about working with a brand, what are the biggest challenges, and where are the biggest opportunities?
So I think the biggest challenge working with the brands is that as some of the brand companies have so many different brands under their umbrella, and they seek to differentiate those brands, and they create brand standards to help them differentiate those brands. Those brand standards drive a lot of cost. And our ability as owners to maintain, to refresh, to renovate, and renew hotels to the newest brand standards within the traditional reserves has really become challenged. So that's really our biggest challenge when it comes to maintaining brand standards. Of course, we'll get project improvement plans, and those add a whole nother layer of challenge for us. A lot of times, if we can pair those with either an acquisition or a disposition, we can create some value, so we're underwriting those to see if they really will pay themselves back. If we're going to implement a PIP and sell a hotel, there's a larger number of buyers that can buy a franchised hotel, so you'll get a better market exit cap rate. So whenever we're looking at the brand standards in those PIPs, we're kind of viewing it in the lens of, will we get our money back? Can we underwrite this incremental investment?
Carl, what do you have to add? You, having just completed your acquisition of Chesapeake, having been traditionally all Hilton branded, what do you see as some of the biggest challenges and opportunities?
I'm going to defer to Mike. I would say that when you
Chesapeake,
I think that when you, as you think about your question, It's really simple. It comes down to the brand has a brand equity perspective, and then an owner has an owner equity perspective. And I think the biggest opportunity between the brands and ownership groups is really making sure that relationship is in balance. And when it gets out of balance, whether it's a PIP or whether it's some other sort of brand-driven initiative, it has to be looked at through the lens of a win-win solution. And I think that the opportunity that exists between ownership groups and the brands are really focused on how do you take what's important to the owner, what's important to the brand, and sort of get that in perspective so that there's a win-win opportunity. And as you look at, the driving forces at the brand level, you'll see that brands, there's a lot of turnover. Ownership groups, there's some turnover. So then you have these relationships that have been established that now get thrown out of whack because the person who you had a PIP with, they're no longer there. The executor is no longer there. So you've got to figure out a way to make sure that the fundamentals of the relationship, and that's equity, ownership, equity from the brand, is in balance. And I think it takes effort. It takes a lot of time. It takes level setting expectations. It takes communication. And it also takes, there's some things you're going to win on, some things you're not going to win on, but it's a long-term perspective.
Mark, I know as a brand and an owner, do you have internal challenges with the operating team versus the ownership?
Well, yeah, we're a little different. Of our roughly 22,000 keys, probably 7,000 are outside branded properties. The rest are, the Venetian, they're the Sands brands. What's been very interesting, though, is we have obviously our own challenges with our own internal ops team and property managers in terms of what their vision is. But we have recently gone through and started to add product to our Four Seasons in Macau, the St. Regis in Macau. We've taken what was the Holiday Inn and we have eliminated the Holiday Inn brand and created a new brand, the Londoner, because we apparently can't have enough themed hotels. So we are transitioning. We also have about 6,000 keys of Sheraton. So in all of these, we've actually have gone in and we're starting to renovate the Sheraton. We've done some significant work with the St. Regis for new product, half-finished buildings that we've now finished off. And what I can tell you is they have no problem with us meeting their standards. We're actually exceeding their standards to the point now they're coming back and asking us to renovate the rooms we didn't renovate. So that's the biggest challenge is we're kind of exceeding their requirements, which is a good place to be, but it now is going to force us into further renovations of those.
It's amazing what that casino revenue will do.
It certainly helps. It certainly helps.
I'm going to go to the next thing. There's been a significant.
Before you move on, the one thing though in that conversation I didn't hear was one comment about a customer. We talked about brand, we talked about owner, we didn't talk about a customer. And I think that the disconnect that happens sometimes, and I'll speak from the brand perspective, is that there's a disconnect between the brand thoughts and just doing things that the customer are really looking for. And if you have that dialogue with your owner and it's the customer that's driving, it's the customer trend, it's the customer thought process. And where the real disconnect comes is somebody hears that and then they say, oh, let's go do it. But they don't test any of it. And then you find yourself with several thousand rooms without a place for people to write on it. So the customer drives a lot of this, and there shouldn't be the disconnect between brand and the customer, because that's how we should be presenting the case. There really is no brand standard. It's the customer's driving this. And so that's why you're going to a 65-inch television in a room, because that has become the expectation.
It's a great point, Gary, and I'm glad that you added that perspective in there, because what we heard today in some of the earlier comments about the importance of generational differences as well as experiential differences is really key to some of the decisions that both owners and brands make. And that customer-centric experience is really critically important.
Can we talk about that for a minute?
Yes.
Awesome. So one of the challenges that we have from an ownership perspective is that, the brand may have an initiative, the customer may have an initiative, but that initiative doesn't really fit across the entire platform. Like you have certain markets where, you've got Gen Xers who are really driving and controlling the conversation. Then you have other markets where there's another population, so there's not one size that sort of fits all. So from an ownership perspective, we have limited dollars, and those dollars are really set, and we're trying to figure out how to take those dollars and sort of spread them across our entire portfolio and also maintain relevancy. And that's where I think that push-pull is really healthy. And I think to Gary's point, the customer is front and center at the table, but from a ownership perspective, they are just sort of one component. There's a market overlay, there's a available resources overlay, and there's a sort of a brand and an ownership overlay. So
I think, and if I can just answer Carl's
Yes.
question, and it's an interesting debate, and I tell this all the time that until the brand remain inspectors, we will have problems because we will always try to. It's like I have a 5-year-old daughter, a 4-year-old daughter. At the time of birth, I would tell my wife that I will visit you when she is 6, 9, 12, and 16. She needs to have the perfect attitude while I'm not investing myself into growth of that particular daughter, my daughter. So I think it has to be a partnership where what the guest is expecting is properly not only communicated. Whenever you do build something once, it is cheaper. When you build it twice, it is more expensive. So having that relationship where it is not an inspection, it is more of a celebration. You set the pre-construction meeting when you go in the front and you just set the right expectations both sides, that this is exactly what we need to do. This is what we need to achieve. So when you are finishing the renovation, when you are finishing the construction, it is a celebration time. And I think that's what is going to take care of the concerns which Gary has raised out as well as what Carl has mentioned.
So you can't underestimate the importance of the relationship of owner, brand, customer, compromise, and coming up with a solution that hopefully is a win-win for all, that recognizes the challenges as an owner you may have financially, but also the challenges as a brand in delivering for a customer the right outcome so that they will, pay that extra average daily rate, or they'll come to your hotel versus the many other brands that are out there. One of the things that has been a huge phenomenon is the significant recent merger and acquisition activity. Marriott and Starwood, Accor, Fairmont, Hyatt, Two Roads, Wyndham and La Quinta, as well as Park's recent acquisition of Chesapeake. What impact is this phenomenon having on your business and more specifically projects? And Gary, I'll start with you because I know folding in, what was Commune and then went to Two Roads and now into Hyatt, I'm sure it has had an impact on how your team operates.
It was kind of like putting together 4 companies at once instead of 2, because the others were in different locations and really had never fully integrated together. And so for us, it's almost a year later, and we've just announced the final reorganization of our whole organization to help support that. But it helped us to kind of divide ourselves into a couple of different groups. It helps us take all of everything that falls into the most overused word, lifestyle category, and take all of our existing brands that were not in there and kind of get a common thought towards each one of those. So for us, it helped to create resources, I think, for those brands, Andaz, Centric, that were in that category that before were being treated like they were just part of the overall pie. And I think if you're trying to define yourself for us, that helped for us to do that.
Well, I know, similarly, with you being part of La Quinta for a long time and then now being part of the Wyndham family of brands, I'm sure that that was an adjustment as well.
Yeah, and last week at the media interview, somebody has asked me the same question, and when you are merging two companies, it's a cultural difference. It's a difference of how you think, how you talk, how you behave. I came to US in 2001, just before 9/11, and my person at the university said they were giving examples of cultural differences. So when you come from Asia and you see a restroom at the airport, you think like you came after a 24-hour long flight. There's some place to rest. Well, there's no bed in there, right? So it's a cultural thing that we need to learn and adapt to each other. And that's exactly what La Quinta and Wyndham has done. That now many of the departments at Wyndham are being led by, like the DNC is led by me, growth is led by David Wilner. So you pick the best out of both sides, and you create a path where both will not only maintain their identity, but learn from each other and create the best path forward.
Carl, yours is very fresh. I mean,
3 weeks.
Literally 3 weeks. And so this is, a major hotel REIT ownership group buying another one and merging those. So what's your insight so far?
It's exciting. I mean, as you think about, going from one season in a company's evolution to another season, Park spun out in 2017. And then in 2019, we go through our first merger and we grow, and it's just exciting. I mean, if you think about all the possibilities that exist within our portfolio legacy, and then you add in the Chesapeake possibilities. So the opportunity to get brand diversification, key. The opportunity to really look at manager diversification, key once again. The opportunity to take assets that are hard branded and then soft brand, another key. So it really has taken our entire internal team and really provided a huge lift because you see the possibilities. It's exciting.
It's exciting.
Yeah.
And I know, Mike, I mean, you went in the other direction. I remember very much because we were involved in that when Host bought 36 Starwood branded hotels and diversified the portfolio away from, significant Marriott portfolio. And then it's been kind of the reverse of that as Marriott bought Starwood, and now a big portion of your portfolio is a Marriott portfolio, and I know it's changed the way you work with Marriott.
Now, roughly 80% of our portfolio is within the Marriott brand, or Marriott family of brands. And it's interesting from my perspective because I'm seeing a lot of operational improvements as a result of that merger, and we're seeing 40 to 50 basis point margin improvements annually, year over year, as Marriott and Starwood really start to integrate their systems. And so that's a huge win for us as an owner. And so we talk about the challenges associated with brands and brand standards and PIPs. But to Gary's point, there's the customer and the customer's benefit, and the combination of that loyalty program and Bonvoy just gives us the largest reach that we didn't have when those two brands were separate and competing. They were all out there. Sheratons were out there, Marriotts were out there, where they're competing with one another. Now they're not competing with one another, and we're benefiting.
Great. Well, on another topic that we heard a lot about today, and maybe this is a little too narrow for focus, but there really has been this huge focus on the millennial traveler and the related consumer trends that they're looking for. It's more than millennials. It's Gen X and Gen Z and baby boomers. And so, what are the trends that you're seeing that are having the biggest impact on your business? And are you seeing big differences in what millennials are looking for compared to the seasoned traveler? And I would count myself as a seasoned traveler. So I'll start with you, Krishna, and then maybe Gary and Mark can weigh in as well.
The expectations are different when you're dealing with new generation people. I am known for giving a lot of examples, but like my 8-year-old son, if he doesn't have a touch screen, he gets mad at the screen, right? I mean, he has never seen something which doesn't respond when you touch it. So we have to adapt to the new expectations of the consumer, but at the same time, the adaptation needs to be within the limits so that, or we create guardrails where we are making sense, We are looking at from the owner's perspective that how much investment is required for each of. So always new and shiny toy is always not great. I mean, it is good, but it is not needed at every hotel and every brand. So we just need to make a fine balance where the designers with the brand marketing people, they are looking at these things from a very comprehensive manner and getting the feedback from ownership that how to adopt this particular thing. Giving examples is there are buildings, the older buildings, it's very hard to get the fiber lines put in, right? You can do certain things, but there are other things which might be a lot more expensive. So how you create that experience without breaking and just telling the owner that you need to bring a bulldozer and restart tomorrow morning. So it's
Gary, this is something I know that Hyatt spends a lot of time with, and particularly as you've incorporated brands like Joie de Vivre and Tommy and Caption and Centric and so forth. So what are you seeing that?
I may be the wrong age demographic to answer this question, but I'll give it a shot.
But you have all that knowledge.
Oh,
that
yeah. Which is what I think for us, what the important piece really is in all seriousness is that we put together groups of individuals working that have a very wide demographic look to themselves, so that we are not looking at it from my chair or from a woman's chair or from a man's chair or from a 30-year-old's chair. We're trying to look at it and put all of these folks together to take that and then try to create something that is focused not only on the millennial or other generations, because I think that trends they tend to go across generations in terms of their minds and their thought process. And I don't think you've got to be 30 years old to like certain things or be 50 or 70. I think you can get multiple generations in the same room together that like the same things, and that's what you're trying to target. So the millennial maybe drives that a little bit. We were working with a restaurant group a few years ago, and we asked them, we said, how do you create what you're creating in your restaurant? They said, well, we're targeting a 36-year-old. And we're like, what do you mean you're targeting a 36-year-old? But it actually, when he explained it, it made some sense. So they found that was the right spot where it went north and south of that age range effectively. So it kind of bridged that. So you have to have some position, because if you don't have a position, then you end up with a coffee shop, where you got a little bit of everything on it, and it's all okay, but nothing's great. And so I think that millennials, maybe their thought process have helped to drive certain things, because a lot of the things that they like, others like at the same time. So you talked about co-working, for example. I don't care what age you are today, we're all kind of co-working to a large degree. If you've been in our offices,
Oh, yeah.
in office in Chicago, right? It's a completely different environment than our old office was. But you look around and it doesn't matter the age group. So I think that you're taking what those millennials kind of liked in the beginning, and then you're filtering it to create what you're creating.
I like to think of it as like a millennial mindset that
truly.
is setting the
Right.
tone for, because just because I'm not a millennial doesn't mean I don't like a lot of the same things that are driving that demographic.
Yeah, and sometimes, just to answer that last piece of the seasoned traveler, I don't know whether the seasoned traveler doesn't put up with enough or puts up with too much, because they just do it all the time. So they're like, yeah, I know. Like, I already got the notification, thank you, American, that my flight tonight's already an hour delayed, right? But they were kind enough to let me know 7 hours in advance that the flight's delayed, but that's like a regular routine.
But you
So I
still
don't
have
really
to be there
react
on
to it.
time.
Yeah, I still have to be there on time in case they change. But that's my reaction. I'm like, yep, okay. So I think maybe the seasoned traveler actually puts up with a little bit more because we're just beaten down by it.
Well, I think I'm going to move us to another question. There we go. Oh, user error. Which industry sector or sectors are you focusing on most as you look at the future, and why? Select service, lifestyle, resort, convention, luxury. I've got Gary, Krishna, and Mike kind of weighing in equally on this. So if you want to start, Gary, and then we can go on to Krishna and Mike, that'd be great.
The answer is yes.
Okay,
We are.
that was a simple answer.
It all depends on where you're at in the world. You know, it really does. You know, the select service segment in the Americas is growing significantly, but if you go into Asia, you're still growing more on the luxury side, and you still have more full service hotels going in there. We just created a brand just for China because we needed to get into the center of China, and the traditional hotel brands were not proliferating there. And it will be purely a Chinese brand. So in that country, we're going to see this brand grow significantly, but only within that country. It's not meant to be exported out of the country. You know, lifestyle, I think that, you know, I don't care what brand it is today, every brand's a lifestyle brand in some way, shape, or form. You know, the reason why initially select service hotels, they were all pretty much the same. And about 10 years ago, everybody was like, yeah, no, but I want something different in the public areas. And so it started to shift that way. So it really does depend on what part of the world you're in, because in a lot of parts, take convention, the markets are all built out.
Yeah.
You know, we're doing a major convention hotel in Portland, and we just did Seattle, and you know, there's not a lot else that's happening there. So you're moving into the other markets.
Mike, you know, I know you've had a bigger concentration of convention, full service, luxury, and resort. Is that
Yeah, and it's so this is where the difference in perspective is really important. The brands are really focused on unit growth. Owners are focused on same-store growth. So when we're looking at assets, we're looking at acquisitions that will fit for us, our iconic and irreplaceable portfolio. That's our filter. Is this asset something that's unique? Is it something that's difficult to duplicate? Are there barriers to entry in this market that are going to make it hard for somebody to build a similar asset and take share away from us? So we don't typically go out and buy a select service hotel because the barriers are very low. Krishna mentioned a moment ago, brands create new brands because the AOPs start to saturate that market. So suddenly they don't have any areas where they can grow. They create another select service brand. It's inexpensive to build. You don't need a lot of land. Entitlements are easier. The barriers to sort of taking share away from those who already own select service hotels in that marketplace are very low. Whereas if you've got a resort on South Beach or a resort in Wailea and Maui, some of these locations where the entitlements are just so difficult to get, nobody's going to come in and build another one, especially if it's a really big property. So we like lifestyle resorts in difficult to develop marketplaces because we know that supply is the #1 challenge to our ability to continue to grow revenue and continue to grow operating income.
And Mark, I know such a big driver of so much of your business is, you know, the casino business. You were sharing with me at breakfast this morning, you know, if you could get $1,000 a room, that's like a lost leader. So, you know, for you, is it all about luxury or is it all about?
Well, I think, you know, our 3 locations are all very different. Our customer base is very different. So in Las Vegas, which used to be traditionally gaming, 17% of our, you know, of our guests are there for gaming. The rest are leisure, and they're there for conventions. So we have to tailor our offering to that. We need to give them something that is, well, everybody still comes to Vegas for the spectacle that is Vegas.
Sure.
Right? So you have to give them that kind of level of spectacle. So we're building this big dome with Madison Square Garden, which will be this interactive, huge 300-foot diameter dome that will have LEDs on the outside and on the inside, and it'll be unlike anything you've ever seen before. So we're partnering with MSG for that. It's going to run, I think they're up to about $1.5 billion now.
So
publicly
Michael,
on that.
the next HotelSpaces in
Do it right
few
there.
years. Oh.
But you go to Macau, and it is different there because the Macau customer is there for gaming. And primarily, that's the only reason. We have MySpace, we have other things, but what's very prevalent in both Macau and in Singapore is there's a lot of wealth coming out of China, tremendous amount, and you won't realize it unless you literally go and see how busy the casinos are in Asia. These people they want quality and luxury, and they're willing to pay for it. So you have to have a wide range, you have to have a great casino, and it's tiered, right, so that you have various levels of player, but you also have to have exceptional food and beverage offerings and every luxury brand you can imagine in the retail mall.
Okay.
And they make tremendous amounts of money. These retail, it's surprising, but these folks come in and they wear every brand name from the sneakers on up to their hats. It's unbelievable. You can't see Gucci on enough parts of their body. It's unbelievable. So you have to understand, and you mentioned this, understand what your customers' expectations are, and then not just meet them, but try and exceed them.
Well, so I can stay on track, I'm going to advance to another question. So increasingly, we're seeing tighter schedules and difficulty with long lead items for both construction and FF&E. Is there a breakdown in the cycle that you see somewhere? And if so, where's the breakdown? And what have you been doing to help improve the process and reduce the associated risk on your projects? And Mike, I'll start with you and then go to Carl.
So we've got 84 assets, 48,000 hotel rooms. We have a 10-year plan for every one of those hotels. We know when we want to renovate it, and we're looking at markets, and we're adjusting that timing, usually about 3 years out. And it's really important because when we pick that renovation cycle, we start to manage business around that renovation cycle. So if we...
How far in advance of that are you managing the business? Is it 2 years out? Is it a year out? I mean, what's...
Effectively, it's about 2 years out.
Okay.
If you're going to take down meeting space and you're going to renovate rooms, you've got to know what your schedule is going to be so that the operations can sell to groups before and after, but not during. And so the challenge becomes when you do set that schedule up, anything that impacts that schedule, if you have labor shortages that put your schedule at risk, if you have permitting delays that put your schedule at risk, for me, that's where the breakdown occurs. That's where the biggest challenge occurs, because I can afford to spend a little bit more on a capital project. I can't afford to lose a big group piece of business, because I'll lose them that year, we lose them the next year, and maybe the third year before they'll trust us and come back again. So that's our biggest challenge. So we plan in advance as much as we can, but then we still have to work around issues that are really outside of our control. If there's a permitting delay or a labor shortage and you can't get contractors to enough bid coverage to get a reasonable price on construction.
Carl, what are you seeing?
Exact same thing.
Yeah.
I mean, Mike and I, we compete, in the same space. We've got 66 assets, 50,000 rooms, and, the same runway with regards to planning projects, same, typical professionals sort of helping us put together the best execution plans. But, the thing that we see where there's a breakdown is the unknown. And you just can't plan for the unknown, whether it's a union strike, whether it's a long lead item there, where there's scarcity in the market to sort of get that long lead item, whether there's a regulatory change. But those are the unknowns that we typically try and anticipate with budget contingency and schedule contingency.
And I don't think it's a static process where you're looking at those risks and everything. It's a constant evolution.
Yeah.
Evolution as the project is going
Yeah.
on. You have to look ahead at those risk items and understand how far in advance do we need to adapt if we do indeed need to adapt.
Yeah.
And how do we communicate that broadly to asset management, ownership, the brand, and so forth, so that the operations team can actually operate the hotel.
And we find we've had a fair amount of success in developing really good teams. Mm-hmm. And that's whether it's the general contractor, the procurement agent,
or the
just
project
having
manager.
Project manager, especially Jones Lang LaSalle. They're exceptional. But we find we've had the greatest amounts of success really managing what I call the fatal flaws, just by relying on the team, where communication is high, trust is high, and the work ethic is high.
Yeah.
And we're able to sort of manage the challenges that we are confronted with in the typical project.
So Mark and Krishna, I mean, do you have anything that...
It requires a different level of collaboration with the owner and the design team and the contractor that you haven't necessarily had before. I mean, Sands is a big animal with processes like you wouldn't believe. What we've now had to do is start to change the processes, bring contractors in earlier so they're part of the team. They're helping our designers make decisions so that we can execute in the same schedule that we originally envisioned. And with a lot of good planning, very strategic thinking, and sometimes outside of the box thinking, we can still hold the schedule and hold the budget and do a much more complicated project than we used to do.
Krishna?
Yeah, at La Quinta, I have renovated in 2016 and 17 50 hotels, and it was a big job I have undertaken. And again, I think the key is the communication. We used to do every morning. You want to make sure that the project manager is meeting with every sub at the job site, and they set the right expectations that this is today's schedule. This is what needs to happen in the evening. There's a 15-minute schedule for cleaning the site so that we don't have guest issues. So the communication and bringing the right team on board at the right time are the two key components. I have seen where the designers try to do, they sit in New York or they sit in wherever they are from, and they try to design something, but visualizing something without looking at it. And we ran into problems like there are 99 rooms, and there's only one room which is being built differently. Nobody thought about it. Nobody went into that room, and we found out that the nightstand doesn't fit in that room, right? So again, having people holding them accountable by bringing them to the job site, making sure that they understand what needs to happen, and then communication on a weekly basis. I think those are the things which you need to do. Yeah.
Well, which brings us to another topic that I know both owners and brands and consumers are constantly looking at and evolving. So how are you keeping up with the ever-changing evolution of technology? And has the hospitality industry discovered the right balance between energy efficiency, costs, and guest comfort and convenience? So, I mean, how do you build in all the backbone and infrastructure for technology that you have no idea that's going to come out in the next 6 months, year, or 2 years? So I'll start with you, Mark, because I know with that many rooms, it's got to be a challenge. And maybe it's not as big of a deal because they're all in the casino and they don't really care what's in the room.
No, they do. I mean, there's an expectation, certainly the younger demographic who grew up having a cell phone in their hand and do everything from there is starting to drive some decisions that we're making as we go into the next wave of CapEx work and design of new projects. So what was basically unheard of 2 years ago, 3 years ago in Sam's of checking in with your phone is now actually being discussed. Like I said, we're a big, slow-moving company. Mr. Adelson, who for many years has been sort of the decision maker, he's finally sort of acquiescing that the customer base is skewing a bit younger and that there's a different level of expectation than we had previously. I will tell you, however, we go back and forth on this in terms of guest convenience and guest inconvenience. So in some of the new rooms we were doing in Macau, we had control panels for everything in the room. And as we built the model room, everybody came in and decided that required people to think too much, and we took them out. And we put very intuitive switches for all this stuff, but no electronic panels. So we backed off of that and really came down to, we want a couple of good things. We want really big TVs, not 63, like 96-inch TVs, monstrous TVs. And we want really good internet. So if you're there with your kids and everybody has 3 or 4 devices and you're streaming on every one of these devices, everybody gets really good internet service. And you want to be able to connect it to the TV. At the end of the day, we decided that was the most important thing. So we stepped back from this. Now we're continuing to look at it, and we will continue to push as we start some of the new projects. But for the things that we've been implementing right now, we've actually not jumped too far ahead.
Sometimes, we're seeing some of the owners that we work are saying, we want that very thing, but we want to keep it simple so that it's very user-friendly. And so if you're going, setting the scenes for multiple scenes for lighting may be, wonderful, but maybe it'd be just nice to sit in the chair and turn on the light. Gary, how about you from Hyatt's perspective?
The first thing I'll say is I still don't know why we just can't get it right and have internet everywhere you want it. I mean, you think that once we got past that, maybe we'd worry about step 2 from there, but that's really, from our perspective, we're focused on just enabling you to do what you want to do with whatever you want to do. okay? So that means, again, internet connectivity. It means a simple light switch. It doesn't mean forcing people into doing something that they don't.
It's not intuitive.
No, so we're really, from the guest perspective, keeping it simple. Internally, I hate the fact that the largest group in our corporate office is the IT group, but that's the reality of the way you're trying to keep people from attacking you. And so then it becomes a defensive measure of trying to keep your system safe.
Right. Carl, how about you?
Yeah, I would echo the exact same thing my colleague said here. I mean, number one, has the hospitality industry figured it out? I'd say no.
Okay.
I would say that, there's a brand push to provide everything that the customer wants. But if you're looking at what the customer wants today and not thinking about where the industry is going, then you're utilizing dollars that could be better spent across your portfolio. We spend a lot of money right now with regards to energy efficiency and trying to create environments where it's intuitive. But what you find is that each sector within your customer base has a different level of expectation. So we're working hard right now with Marriott, with Hilton, and with Hyatt on trying to figure out what the right balance is with regards to IT and technology. And then we bring in, technology consultants to help us figure it out.
Sure.
Because while we're really good at being a hotel owner, we're not the best at IT.
Well, I think, it's always the big challenge when you're planning a project is, how far do you go? And how much backbone do you provide when you're tearing into the rooms so that you can plan for the future? But I think there is a big aspect to, consumer use and simplicity that's driving some of the technology today. The final question that I have today is a bit of a softball, but it might be the most fun thing because, we're all in different stages of our careers, and we've been lucky enough to have the senior leaders from the owners and brands. So I'm gonna go down the line and ask you what's the most fun aspect of your job or your life? So Krishna, I'll start with you.
For me, creation is something which I enjoy. Whether it is a creation of a room, whether it is a creation of a building, whether it is a creation of a hotel. I think it comes because I'm an architect. So
We won't hold that against you, though.
but creation, and when I see these things, and we take a piece of dirt and we turn that into a business with the help of our owner, what a satisfying journey that is.
Mark, how about you?
I'm going to say two things. So before I started with Sands, I had been to Asia once, and I've probably been there 27 times now in the last year. So the sort of the cultural norms that are a little different over there in how you do business, and specifically in Japan, where we've been pursuing a couple of opportunities, the ritual of the presentation of the cards, and do you bow or do you shake hands? I mean, it's very interesting to immerse yourself in a culture that's very different in terms of how they do business. So that's been very interesting. The second thing is actually living and working in Las Vegas. Driving into, our office is in the Venetian, so driving in the morning when all the neon lights are off and there's nobody out on the street, there's still people drinking, but a lot less. But it's quiet. And it's quiet, and you walk in, and over the day, to walk through our property, and especially when you leave at night at 7 or 8 o'clock, the excitement and the transformation of every part of the Strip from morning to evening is so exciting. You come out, and there's thousands of people in your property and out in the streets, and the lights are all on, and everything's happening. It's a remarkable transformation. I love to see it every day. Unfortunately, I see it about once a week. But it's really a fun aspect of the job because people are there to have a good time.
Oh, that's great.
And it's really exciting at night when you walk through the casino and you see people jumping up down because they've won $5 in the slot machine.
Hey, Gary, how about you?
Oh, David, definitely being on panels. That's definitely.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
You mentioned creation. Creation is a lot of fun, but what I could really get a kick out of is people that know me know I like to go sit in hotel lobbies, and I like to go sit in space and watch it and see if it works the way it was intended to work. And when that happens, that's a lot of fun because, you know, we can build a lot of different things, but you see the flaws in it all the time. You sit in a chair and you go, did anybody ever sit in this chair before they put it in this room? It's the most uncomfortable thing. And so that, to me, is when you can sit there and you can watch people and you can just see, are they doing it the way they're supposed to be doing it, or the way you intended or you thought they were going to do it? And if that's the case, then we've been successful.
That's great. Mike?
So I'm a developer within an investment company. So for me, the most fun I have is when I can find space within the properties and the real estate that we own and create value, whether that's transitioning 27 holes of golf into 18 holes of golf and creating land for residential development and pairing that with an increased spa, tennis, fitness, and pools program so we can create a membership program. Those kinds of opportunities that we have within this great portfolio, for me, are very energizing and a lot of fun. We've all got to renovate and renew our hotels, and we're always doing that, but finding spaces within those hotels that we can repurpose and find ways to create value, I get a lot of energy from.
Well, I think it's also
That's what's fun for me.
it's the evolution of experiential travel, where tennis used to be a big thing, or that much more golf was, and you can really monetize an existing asset to create something pretty special. Carl, how about you?
I'm going to throw you a softball here.
Okay.
Okay. So I think the most fun aspect of my job is when you have problems, things don't go right, and you're able to sort of be part of a team that Jones Lang LaSalle is a part of.
Oh.
And you're able to solve problems in a way that most people didn't think those problems were solvable. And then you're able to see people grow from that experience so that as they go on to their next project, they're able to use that previous experience as a springboard to be more confident, have more fun. This is really a fabulous industry.
Oh.
And as you think about walking into the spaces that Gary mentioned, you think about all the other experiences, we create these spaces that people enjoy. And I think it's a blessing to be able to do it.
I look at it and I always say to our teams and anyone who will listen, it's all about hospitality. So it's not just the product that we're creating, but it's the people that we have the opportunity to work with along the way and to develop relationships that for us is such, a great thing, because those relationships, we were sitting there, you used to be at the Sands and you met Mark, who's your successor there. We were at lunch and you saw one of your former colleagues from Disney. Sometimes we have an opportunity to get to know people, and those relationships are long and lasting, and that's what makes this industry great. And I'd love for you to all join me in thanking this incredible panel for their insight and information, but also for just a really nice interactive discussion. So thank you very much.